What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So, what if I told you Nintendo isn't ready to get rid of the 3DS just yet, even with the Switch Lite coming? We're going to talk a bit about that one because it's very odd to hear about that. We also heard something about a D-pad and the Joy-Cons, but not what we wanted to hear with that one. And then Super Mario 64 is back in the news because something pretty insane happened that I think is going to open up the world of ROM hacks much further than it already has been. So some fun stuff to go over today. As always, guys, enjoy these videos. Make sure you hit the like button. It does help out, and get subscribed. Have a fun video planned for the weekend where we're gonna rip apart a Panasonic GameCube, which is pretty rare, but I figure we'll take a look at why people don't like actually going through them and taking them apart. Today, we're actually gonna start with Dragon Quest Builders 2. It's out today, and reviews came out for it, and I have to tell you, it looks like some people are really going to enjoy this one based on some of the reviews. A lot of 9s getting thrown around, some 9.5s, some 8s. There was actually a really good list made up here, as you're seeing, from VG247 that just kind of goes through all of them and links to them pretty well, so you can kind of get an idea as to the reviews for it. But pretty much everything around it looks better than the first one. Looks like I took the first one and built off of it. I didn't spend a lot of time with the first one, but a lot of people told me it was good. Some people said they were really into it and they spent way too much time playing it. I've never been like a big create a world or a Minecraft person, but I do like Dragon Quest, so I'm thinking I'm going to go ahead and take another shot at this one, probably get it on the Switch since that seems like a game that would work well in handheld mode as well, so I'll check it out there, but I'm probably going to pick it up today and see if I can take another shot at Dragon Quest Builders. Also, if you missed it, one of my favorite indie games of the last few years got some free DLC. This is actually from The Messenger and Picnic Panic, and for the most part, it seems like everyone's enjoying it. Now, I have to go and check it out myself, but a lot of reviews and previews were written up for this thing, and it sounds like there's nothing really new in terms of abilities or skills that you get in it. It's just more of the game, but they did some pretty fun stuff with the 8-bit, 16-bit changes in terms of the art and some of the visuals in the game, which is pretty cool. Looks to be about 5 hours according to a few outlets, and they do still have some new collectibles in there, so I'm looking forward to going back and checking it out. And the DLC is just, it's free, so it's like, why not? I just have to get some time to get around to getting to it, considering I just talked about going to get Dragon Quest Builders 2, and then we have Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3, and then we have Fire Emblem, and then again in August when we have other games, including, you get Astral Chain. It's starting to get a little packed with games, so it's gonna be tough, but I'm gonna try my best to get back to the Messenger to try out this DLC. Also, we had heard originally about one of the co-creators of Halo actually going off, creating their own studio, and making a new game. Well, kinda, it's gonna be a sci-fi shooter, go figure, right? One of the co-creators of Halo doing this, but of course you hear about that kind of talent and creator going off and doing their own thing, and it gets you interested. Well, we actually saw a little bit of a trailer. It's definitely a teaser. We still need to find out more at apparently Gamescom, which is where they're going to like fully unveil it, but it's called Disintegration, and this is being done, of course, by Marcus Leto with his new studio, V1 Interactive. And again, this is looking like it's gonna be maybe like, we've heard Destiny, Halo vibe, stuff like that, and it doesn't surprise me to hear that's kind of what it's giving off, considering the person behind it, and of course, probably built their studio up to have talent to make a sci-fi shooter. But again, I'm always interested in this stuff, and we just got an announcement for then an announcement, which we saw here, for then an announcement at Gamescom. But it's definitely one I'm gonna keep an eye on just because I'm such a big fan of Halo, and I really like obviously the first Halo, which I think most of us did on the original Xbox. So I'm curious what they would be able to go off and do on their own with their own creative vision and direction there with Disintegration. And guys, some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. We're gonna start with the 3DS. Now, I think most of us figured with the Switch Lite showing up in September, that's definitely the end of the 3DS. I mean, think about it. They've taken their projections for the 3DS down to 1 million units at this point in the next fiscal year, the one we're in now, actually. And it doesn't seem like they're pushing out any titles. When was the last time they really even talked about the 3DS like that? There wasn't a 3DS game in sight at E3, really, from Nintendo themselves, and they pretty much made that obvious when they said, hey, We don't have anything for the 3DS to show from the first parties. They've all pretty much moved on to the Switch. However, Doug Bowser was asked about this by CNET, and this is what he had to say. We'll continue to support our 3DS family of systems as long as there is demand. So I look at this, and I see Doug Bowser not ready to call it quits for the 3DS. I mean, the Switch Lite isn't technically out yet, so the 3DS, while most of us even looked at the Switch and said that should replace the 3DS because it's technically a handheld as well as a home console, they weren't ready to get rid of the 3DS. In fact, if you remember, they actually just announced a 2DS XL when we all thought that whole family of systems was going away. They added another member. The 2DS XL did actually fairly well, and people have bought into it quite a bit. It's at a good price, and it comes with a charger, which is shocking, right? Crazy talk there. but the 3DS at this time, I think with the Switch Lite, I think that's it. I know there's a great library for the 3DS. There really is. I've actually gone back and started replaying some of the 3DS games that I didn't spend as much time with, just for fun when I get a chance now. And yes, there are some good ones there. I'm still looking for Persona Q2, by the way. I think I'm just going to order it online. I wanted to try to find it in a store around me, but nobody's carrying that thing. I just don't think they stocked as much because the 3DS isn't really selling like that. Everyone's moved on to the Switch. The Switch Lite shows up. It's what, $10 more than what a new 3DS XL is, $50 more than a 2DS XL, and you start to wonder, why wouldn't someone just buy the Switch Lite when they go to the store? That's kind of how we're looking at it, but Nintendo makes a lot of money right now, I would say, on the 3DS, the 2DS XL, the regular 2DS, so they're not quite ready to turn it in. It still sells 2,500 units or so per week in Japan, and that's a fair amount of money for Nintendo that would just at this point be seen as free money. They're really not spending much more time for developing for that system anymore. So I guess in their case, why not is the way they're looking at it. The way I see it is, I would just buy a Switch Lite. Next up, let's talk about Assassin's Creed Odyssey, because what's happening here with Ubisoft is actually kind of funny, because it's pretty obvious what they're going for here and what they're not actually happy about. So if you're unaware, they introduced a mode where it's a create a story mode, basically, where you can actually post these online and people can go through them. Well, what's funny is the thing that seems to be the most popular, or at least one that keeps showing up on kind of the lists when you take a look, are farming quests. Now, what's a farming quest? Well, it's a quest designed specifically around gathering as much experience as possible in the shortest amount of time possible, because, well, people see Odyssey as kind of a grind fest at times, especially if you don't buy into the experience booster that a lot of people had criticized Ubisoft for introducing in a single-player game early on. Well, Ubisoft's not happy about some of these create a story missions that appear to be about farming, and this is what they had to say on their own forum, correcting, we'll say, some of the issues. Story Creator Mode was designed to be a tool for players to let their creativity and imagination run free as they build their very own stories to share with others using a modified version of our tools our own designers use to develop the quests in the game. However, since the launch of the beta, we have noticed an interesting flow of farming quests that exploit the tool to get large amounts of experience. These exploits risk jeopardizing the overall quality, integrity, and purpose of Story Creator Mode and results in less visibility for the creative, interesting, and frankly fantastic community stories that have been published. Now, they go on further to say that they'll basically start removing these farming quests from kind of the top story or top quest list, and they even say they'll go on to sanction those who continue to create these, I guess, or spam them. But Ubisoft should look at this and say, people want to farm experience in a single-player game, by the way, but that doesn't work for Ubisoft. Why doesn't that work for Ubisoft? Well, it's because they sell experience boosters. Let's be honest. I will say, if the whole top of like the create a story thing is spanned with these farming quests, yeah, that would be kind of old. I'd want to see some that are a bit more creative, a bit more interesting and fun, not necessarily ones that are about farming experience when I don't really need experience anymore. I mean, Ubisoft could just make a whole section for farming quests, right? Why don't you do that? Do a little tag like Mario Maker has, where you search for farming quests, unless you really don't want people to farm experience, because, you gotta sell those experience boosters. Next up, let's talk about Super Mario 64. I'm not kidding, we're talking about a Nintendo 64 game today, because something very, very interesting has happened. We talk about Keiza Manuar, who makes these really cool Nintendo 64 ROM hacks for Mario 64, right? He's been shut down by Nintendo even at one point. He's the one who put like the portal gun, I believe, into Mario 64. Well, it seems like that scene is about to become very, very interesting because out of nowhere, Mario 64 has been decompiled, which means people who generally will do these ROM hacks aren't necessarily tied to having to make a ROM for Nintendo 64 anymore, because that means that people can actually take the Mario 64 when it's decompiled and port it to other systems like your PC, like a PlayStation 2. Who's gonna port it to a Dreamcast? That's the question. Basically, you won't necessarily need an emulator to start the thing up. You won't need an N64 emulator. If someone wants to take the time and port it, they can. I mean, Modern Vintage Gamer had a really cool video about Diablo being ported, but this is very interesting because that also means people could do things like add in new textures, they could change out files, they could do all kinds of stuff that would have normally been, we'll say, out of bounds for a Nintendo 64 ROM and a Nintendo 64 emulator, right? They don't have to play nice with that anymore if they want to. Now, here's the other thing. How far are people going to push this to get that cease and desist from Nintendo? Because if there's one thing we've learned from the internet with ROM hacks, translations, all kinds of stuff, companies, specifically Nintendo, are not, they're not afraid to issue cease and desist orders constantly. So at that point, technically, people play around with the assets and stuff, right, with ROM hacks. Nintendo seems to let it go a lot of times, but other times they definitely crash down on this. I say a lot of times because there are a lot of Mario 64 hacks and mods right now that really have gone unnoticed from Nintendo. However, when people start porting what Nintendo still considers part of their library, right? We've seen it on the Virtual Console. I'm sure at some point it'll head to a Switch or a Switch 2, or who knows down the line when that subscription service starts expanding. At that point, Nintendo will probably take shots at people with cease and desist. So I'm very interested to see what people can actually do with this now that it's been decompiled and how far people are willing to take it. Just watch out for Nintendo. And in our last bit of news, would you like a D-pad on your Joy-Con? I saw that Switch Lite and I saw that D-pad and I said, I need that on a Joy-Con now. Well, seeing I'd asked Doug Bowser, and he didn't seem that interested in telling us about a Joy-Con revision at all, saying there are no plans or nothing to announce in terms of further variations of Joy-Con. Now, they're not ready to announce anything. That's fine. And here's the thing, Nintendo, I would like the option for a D-pad. Not everyone is taking their Joy-Con controllers and handing them to friends like consistently. Some people don't even do that. Some people probably never even comes off of their Switch because they have a Pro Controller and then the Switch comes out and they go on about their day and it just stays there. That's fine. So I think the idea here is an option considering you have now added a D-pad to the Switch Lite. And while I understand they probably want to give the Switch Lite its own reason to exist, I don't know if a D-pad is enough of a reason to be like, oh, I need that Switch Lite. I think the price is enough at this point at $200 for it to exist. I think we need a D-pad Joy-Con, not one from third parties, one that's fully featured and has a D-pad because, I mean, it would make a lot of money. Let's be real. People would buy that thing up in a heartbeat and they would get their full $50 all day for a single left Joy-Con with a D-pad. Just because we've gone years and years without it. Let's be real, they would make a lot of money. So I would like to see that. I mean, honestly, why don't you introduce a different color as well while you're at it, considering it's been a little while since we've seen like a full-on brand new Joy-Con color or something, maybe a special edition one. I don't know. It'd be cool. Maybe do one in like the Famicom colors, the red and gold Famicom colors, and it has a D-pad, you know, because that's where the D-pad really was popularized. Why not? Just an idea, Nintendo, you know, don't go too crazy over there. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day from yesterday. This one's actually from Francisco Fernandez saying, Wii games on Switch, Pandora's Tower, The Last Story, Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn. Yeah, here's the fun thing about this. Those games, of course, specifically like Pandora's Tower, Last Story, those showed up towards the end of the Wii's life when people weren't as into it, I think. They were like really big ones online with like niche audiences and everything. And people got really excited about them coming over because I believe originally they were in like Europe and stuff. And then they eventually came west and that was really cool. But I don't think they sold as well as they would have wanted them to. Now you bring those over to the Switch where we've seen JRPGs do very well. Yeah, I think you have something there. I think it's worth porting. I think they could get their money for it. I mean, consider they're showing up and they're on a cartridge, they have the nice case and everything. That would be amazing. And honestly, like Pandora's Tower, I didn't get a chance to really play that much. So I would love to get a chance to play it on the Switch. And again, there's probably a ton of Wii games. I read through quite a few of them. Mad World, for example, just a bunch of Wii games that people probably just didn't even get a chance to play because, let's be honest, most households, the Wii was like a Wii Sports, tennis, or bowling machine because that's what the family wanted to play and it was in the living room. And ladies and gentlemen, let's go do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit the like button, it really helps out. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about today, whether it is this 3DS situation with the Switch Lite. Do you think the Switch Lite is gonna kind of just come out and then they'll just forget about the 3DS and by next year it'll be discontinued? Or do you think Nintendo's really gonna keep that 3DS and that 2DS around for like the next 3 years or something? Is this thing gonna be, you know, like 10, 11 years old before we finally say goodbye to it? Also, what do you think about Super Mario 64 being decompiled and possibly ported to other systems and actually having things like new textures, all kinds of crazy stuff added to it? Thanks guys for watching. I'll see you on Monday morning for Newswave, 8 a.m. Eastern Time.